9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Alcohol, the most common of all the addictions, I think, and the drug that society calls a drink. So let's start with what is alcohol. When we talk about alcohol, we're talking primarily about ethanol, which is a psychoactive chemical produced through fermentation of sugars by yeast for stronger products, usually concentrated through distillation. That's a mouthful. You see, alcohol isn't simply a beverage, it is a drug. It affects the brain, it affects the nervous system, judgment, coordination, emotions, and behavior. And alcohol can be found in many things: beer, wine, spirits, ciders, liqueurs, mixed drinks, medications, certain desserts and foods. And the percentage of alcohol in a drink varies considerably. That's why how much someone drinks, how quickly they drink, and how often they drink, it all matters. So what is alcohol made of? Well, the intoxicating ingredient is ethanol. And don't ask me to give you the scientific breakdown of that. I'm not going to. Okay? I'm not that smart. But different alcoholic drinks contain ethanol mixed with water and other compounds that contribute to the flavor, the aroma, the color. So just a couple examples. Beer is water, malted grains, hops, and yeast with ethanol produced during fermentation. Wine is primarily fermented grapes or other fruits. Spirits is fermented materials that has been distilled to produce a higher alcohol concentration. Ciders are fermented fruit juice. And liqueurs are spirits combined with flavorings, sugars, and other ingredients. The important thing for recovery isn't whether the alcohol came from beer, wine, or whiskey, or whatever. The drug is ethanol. So how is alcohol used? Sounds like a silly question, but let's answer it. Most commonly, alcohol is swallowed and absorbed through the digestive system. You drink it. It then enters the bloodstream and travels through the body, including the brain. The liver metabolizes most of the alcohol, but it can only process alcohol at a limited rate. So when someone drinks alcohol faster than their body can process it, blood alcohol concentration rises. That's when intoxication becomes increasingly dangerous. So what does alcohol do to the brain, you may ask? And this is where it gets really interesting. And I didn't know all of this when I was researching. Alcohol affects several neurotransmitter systems. It generally enhances inhibitory signaling through GABA and suppresses excitatory signaling involving glutamate. I had to read that. I'm not going to lie to you. But in simple English, let me explain it. Alcohol presses the brain's brakes. Okay? And at first that can feel good. A person might feel relaxed, confident. It reduces anxiety, increases sociability and euphoria, reduced inhibitions. That's basically what it means. Step 2 of what it means. As those alcohol levels rise, those same effects can become poor judgment, slurred speech, poor coordination, memory problems, aggression, confusion, loss of consciousness. And then it goes another step. At very high levels, respiratory depression, coma, and death. So that very complicated thing that I had to actually read for you, that's what that means. Okay? So why does alcohol become addictive? And this is the critical part. Alcohol doesn't just make someone drunk. Repeated alcohol exposure can change the brain's reward and stress systems. See, over time, the brain begins adapting to the presence of alcohol, and the person will develop tolerance. They need more alcohol to produce the effects they previously obtained from less alcohol. They become dependent. The brain has adapted to alcohol to such an extent that removing it can produce withdrawal. And then you have addiction or alcohol use disorder. The person continues drinking despite significant consequence and has difficulty controlling or stopping their drinking. Alcohol use disorder can range from mild to moderate to severe, depending on the number of diagnostic symptoms present. And that comes from the NIAAA, what I've just spoken to you about. All right? That is my reference. So number 6, the alcohol trap. Well, this is how the cycle can develop. You drink, you get relief, it's a reward, you repeat. Then you get stressed, you drink, it's relief, you repeat. Eventually, the person may no longer drink because they particularly enjoy being drunk. They drink because being sober feels uncomfortable. And that's a major transition. You see, the drink has changed from I want to feel good to I don't want to feel bad. And that's one of the mechanisms that makes addiction so powerful. So what happens when someone wants to stop? And this is extremely important. Listen carefully. A person who's been drinking heavily for a prolonged period can develop alcohol dependence. When alcohol is suddenly removed, the brain can effectively be left with too much excitatory activity and too little of the inhibitory effect it had adapted to being provided with alcohol. That means that the withdrawals can include things like tremors, sweating, anxiety, insomnia, nausea, vomiting, increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, agitation, some cases seizures, hallucinations, tremors. There's a list. And here's where here's the crucial recovery message. Alcohol withdrawal can be medically dangerous and sometimes fatal. The NIAAA reports that up to half of the people with alcohol addiction experience some withdrawal symptoms, while a smaller portion require medical monitoring because of potentially dangerous withdrawals. So someone who's physically dependent on alcohol shouldn't assume they can simply quit cold turkey without medical advice. That's why rehabs are there. That's why I went to rehab. Alcohol was one of my substances. So what does long-term alcohol use do? Well, long-term alcohol use can affect almost the entire body. The brain, cognitive impairments, memory problems, changes in brain function, increased risk of neurological problems. The liver gets fatty, alcohol-associated hepatitis, cirrhosis, liver failure. As for the heart and your circulation, you get high blood pressure, cardiomyopathy, increased cardiovascular risk. Your digestive system, gastritis, pancreatic disease, nutritional problems. As for your mental health, heavy on depression, anxiety, sleep, and emotional regulation. And then there are consequences that don't show up on a medical scan. Things like relationships where your trust starts disappearing. Your family, your children can experience instability, fear, and broken promises. Your work performance and your attendance and your reliability will deteriorate. Money will disappear. Okay, income can disappear into alcohol and the consequences surrounding that. Your identity. The person can eventually begin believing that this is who they are. And that's one of addiction's biggest lies. So the question now is, how difficult is recovery? And I'm a recovering addict from alcohol. Yes, drugs as well. But alcohol was my biggest problem. And there's no honest number on a recovery rate. So I can't say there's a 73% recovery rate. Recovery isn't measured that simply. Research shows something much more hopeful though. The NIAAA, who I did a lot of research on regarding this topic, reports that the majority of people with alcohol use disorder reduce or resolve their drinking problems over time. One nationally representative analysis, so one kind of study, found that more than half of people who had alcohol addiction at least a year before being surveyed no longer met the alcohol addiction criteria during the previous year, apart from cravings. So that's important, because addiction is not automatically a life sentence. And people can get clean. That study shows that people can recover from alcohol addiction. But recovery isn't a simple detox. Detox can be the beginning, yes. But long-term recovery might involve medical treatment, counseling, behavioral therapy, medication where and if it's needed, mutual support groups, which is vital, family support, change of environments, which is also vital, identifying your triggers, developing coping skills, rebuilding relationships, and learning how to live without alcohol. Detox alone is not going to help you recover. All right. The next question is, can the brain recover? Well, yes, to a certain degree for many, many people. Alcohol-related brain changes can improve with prolonged abstinence, although the extent and speed of recovery will vary between people. Okay. And that's a very important message for someone in recovery. You aren't simply removing a bottle. You're giving your brain the opportunity to adapt to a life without that drug. So what does your real recovery look like? Real recovery isn't just, I don't want to drink anymore. Okay? It's rebuilding the life that alcohol damaged. It's improving your physical, your mental health, your relationships, your quality of life, your overall functioning. And like I say, find God. It's so important. So recovery can look like this. It can look like a father who's become present again, a husband who becomes trustworthy again, an employee who becomes dependable again, and the son who calls his parents again. The person who wakes up without wondering what happened the night before. That is recovery. So now my recovery message on all of this. And here's what I want you to take home. Alcohol promised freedom, but eventually demanded everything in return. It promised confidence, then it took away your dignity. It promised you friendship, then it isolated you. It promised you relief, then it created the pain you needed relief from. It promised that tomorrow would be different, then tomorrow became another day drinking. Addiction doesn't have to write the final chapter. Recovery begins when we stop asking, how can I control this drug? And start asking, how can I rebuild my life without it? That is why understanding the enemy matters. You cannot fight what you don't understand. So guys, the next talk we're going to do is nicotine, tobacco, vaping. Thank you for listening. I hope this helped, the explanation of it. We are going to go deeper and deeper as we go. Please, any questions, let me know. I love you guys. I'll see you again soon.